Hey, what's up everyone? In today's video, we're taking a look at the available characters in Wayfinder for early access, their signature weapons and abilities. This will be a refresher for those who played in closed testing or a preview for new players. If you missed my video on housing and all the planned features, be sure to check that out. And if you want to keep up with all things Wayfinder, make sure to subscribe for more guides and news. I also just want to say thank you guys so much for the support, and I can't wait to get you even more videos very soon. Wayfinder is a character-based game in which you won't be making your own custom character, but instead discovering and playing multiple pre-made heroes. You'll have the ability to make them unique through multiple layers of customization, including cosmetics, armor, dyes, as well as defining your own playstyle through builds, talent choices, echo mods, and more. So while there might be multiple players playing the same Wayfinder at a given time, each one will be unique through looks and stat builds. Picking a Wayfinder does not lock you to that character permanently. You'll be able to swap other Wayfinders you've acquired at any time as long as you're not in a dungeon. At the very start of the game, you can test out the characters in the tutorial before selecting your first Wayfinder. There's also an account-wide progression system that rewards your time spent across different characters, but you're able to focus on one character only should you choose to do so. In the current state, you will not be able to swap these abilities. However, in a stream between Rurikon and community manager Alex Campbell, it was hinted that they are looking at allowing players to swap out abilities in a future system. I'll have that video linked in the description so you can check it out. You are able to spend points in making abilities better or adding extra effects, depending on how many points you put into them, but you will not be able to max out all abilities. Each Wayfinder will fall under one of three archetypes in the game, and they are War Masters, Arcanists, and Survivalists. There will be an archetype progression system, so playing characters within a specific archetype will also contribute to your level within that system. While abilities cannot be changed currently, you are able to use any weapon type. Wayfinders have a signature weapon which is thematically tied to their character, and the signature weapons have an ability as well. You can choose to stick with your selected Wayfinder signature weapon or mix and match from any other weapons you obtain. Lastly, while Wayfinders have general combat profiles, remember you'll be able to build Wayfinders in unique ways that allow for different playstyles. Let's take a brief look at each Wayfinder's starting abilities and signature weapons. First up, we have Niss, the Eldrin Shadow Dancer, who's a rogue-type character slashing through the shadows with high-speed attacks and mobility. Niss is part of the Arcanist archetype, and her combat profile leans heavily towards dealing damage and offensive prowess. Her first ability is Shadow Step, in which you dash through your target dealing damage while spawning a clone that also dashes and deals damage again quickly after. Umbral Aura is an ability in which Niss gains a buff with a swirl animation that allows her next 3 dodges to deal shadow damage to a nearby enemy. Her third ability, Vengeful Shade, allows Niss to leap into the air and throw daggers dealing damage, while becoming immune to any incoming damage during this time, and then gaining the option of leaping backwards. Timing this ability will be key but very useful in combat. Her fourth ability, Gloom Shroud, allows the use of Shadow Step without any resource cost for the next few seconds. You can utilize this for mobility and damage, as you can cover a large area quite easily. Her passive ability, Lingering Shadow, grants an attack power buff for a few seconds after dodging. As you can see, pairing dodges with her attacks go hand in hand, ramping up the damage profile, and can be expanded upon later through ability points and echoes. Knight's Edge is her signature weapon, which resembles magic-imbued daggers, and the weapon ability Daggerfall creates floating daggers around the player that launches towards enemies when they get in range. Our second character on the Arcanist archetype is Kyros, the War Mage. Kyros attacks with mystical power, and his combat profile leans heavily towards offense and dealing massive damage. We're going to look first at his passive Arcane Fragments, in which you generate fragments by using Siphon Radiant, one of his abilities, and landing combo finishers. These fragments are automatically consumed to grant extra charges of another ability called Savage Rake. Siphon Radiant releases a big wave of magic, dealing damage to enemies and creates a fragment. This ability also provides cooldown reduction. Savage Rake does massive damage in front of Kyros and can absorb fragments to allow this ability to be used at no cost. It has a really cool animation that looks almost like a wave of shadow magic erupting from the ground. Arcane Focus marks enemies with an energy-type bomb that explodes at max power or when the timer finishes. Lastly, we have Hand of Reckoning, which is an area of effect ability that does damage to enemies caught inside the radius. His signature weapon is Epitaph and resembles a magical scythe, and comes with the weapon ability Arcane Harvest, which does damage in a 360-degree radius that steals power from all enemies, empowering Kyros per enemy hit. Next, we have Wingrave the Seeker, who is under the War Master archetype. Wingrave is great at supporting allies and good at close combat, utilizing Shields of Light and support abilities. Wingrave's combat profile leans heavily towards defense and support. Wingrave's first ability is Righteous Strike that does an explosion of damage to an enemy while also healing Wingrave and nearby allies. Radiant Pulse, his second ability, forms a wall of protection from incoming projectiles and protects any players behind the shield while also boosting defense. Judgment marks enemies and places a halo of energy above them, and any player that attacks the marked enemies will be healed. It's a cool leech ability that can be useful in many situations. Lastly, we have Divine Aegis, in which Wingrave places a giant dome of protection on the ground. Anyone standing in the barrier will be immune to incoming damage and also receive healing over time. As you can see, Wingrave has some really useful abilities that pair well with group play. Healing Pulse is his passive ability, which allows melee-based finishers to heal the player and one additional nearby ally. Bastion is Wingrave's signature weapon featuring a sword and shield combo and comes with the ability Power Bash, in which allows the player to utilize a shield bash that does massive impact and guard break damage. Senja the champion is also under the War Master archetype and delights in close combat while dragging enemies across the battlefield. Her combat profile features a balance between offense, defense, and control, yet still able to support allies on the battlefield. Senja is unique in that you are able to hold and charge some abilities for an extra effect. Her passive ability Crowd Favorite allows holding certain abilities for a longer period of time to showboat. While showboating, she can't be staggered, takes reduced damage, and increases crowd's favor, in which the more favor she has, the more ability power and attack damage she will do. Her first ability, Gladiator's Pummel, punches forward and then allows the player to hold the ability to begin showboating. On release, Senja will do an additional punch and buff her next weapon attack. Fully maxing out the showboat charge will cause the additional punch to do more damage. Gain Favor is Senja's second ability. As you hold down this ability in order to showboat, this increases your favor from the passive ability. Once releasing this ability, Senja taunts nearby enemies towards her while also buffing allies. Lightning Grasp is an AoE CC type ability that unleashes lightning in a cone in front of her and pulls nearby enemies. This can be used to group enemies together or a pseudo taunt to help party members get distance from enemies. Senja's last ability is Grand Finale, where she charges at enemies with an aggressive lightning spear, dealing massive damage and fully filling the crowd's favor bar through her passive. Her signature weapon is Colossus, which is a devastating two-handed sword, and the weapon ability Gladiator Slice, which performs a quick melee attack and buffs the next ability. Using Gladiator Slice again will perform an empowered attack, dealing damage 2 additional times. Silo the Tactician is a versatile combatant favoring both melee and ranged combat. He is under the Survivalist archetype, and his combat profile is fairly balanced, leaning towards range and support. Silo's first ability tosses a firebomb towards enemies, debuffing and igniting them, dealing damage over time. This ability pairs with Oil Bomb and causes a chain reaction. Oil Bomb is another bomb you toss at enemies that leave a pool on the ground, slowing enemies and causing them to take additional damage. Tossing Oil Bomb followed by a Firebomb causes a chain reaction and deals a good amount of damage. Silo can also use Proto-Clone, which causes him to dash backwards and leave behind a holographic clone that taunts nearby enemies to attack it, and this will last until the clone expires. His final ability, Arch Nemesis, sends out a gadget called Egg that unleashes shock damage to enemies in an area of effect. Egg will deal damage and slow enemies for a short time, and has a really neat animation. Strategic Advantage is Silo's passive ability and does bonus melee and range damage to enemies that are debuffed. His signature weapon Longshot is a high-powered rifle and comes with the weapon ability Deadeye, which creates 3 weak spots on enemies in range. Shooting these weak spots deal high amounts of damage and guaranteed critical hits. Lastly, we have Venomous the Alchemist, who is the first Wayfinder featured with the release of Founder Season 1. Venomous is under the Survivalist archetype and can switch between both melee and ranged combat very easily. Her combat profile favors ranged and support through poisoning enemies and strengthening allies. Her passive ability, Master of Venoms, has a few layers to it. First, weapon hits apply venom and deals damage over time, stacking up to 5 times. Weapon hits against enemies with 5 stacks of venom creates a poison cloud on the ground that also applies venom and deals damage to enemies inside. Only 1 poison cloud can be created every 5 seconds through this mechanic. However, she is able to create more poison clouds through the ability Venom Thrusters, in which she dashes in a direction leaving a trail of poison clouds on the ground. These clouds will also deal damage and apply stacks of venom. Using Vampiric Blast launches a bomb that absorbs up to 5 nearby clouds and after a short delay explodes, dealing damage and healing allies depending on how many clouds were absorbed. Transfusion allows Venomous to shoot a volley of poison needles that lock onto nearby enemies and deal damage. Hitting an enemy with these needles sends out a healing projectile to seek out an ally that heals over time based on the amount of venom stacks the targeted enemy had when the poison needles hit. Her final ability, Deep Breath, creates a massive explosion that instantly applies 5 stacks of empowered venom, which does damage over time and counts as additional stacks for the Transfusion ability and Master of Venom's passive ability. Nightshade is her signature weapon and is a burst rifle that launches out venom-infused needles. The weapon ability, Wyvern's Fury, loads the weapons with an empowered clip and changes Nightshade into an automatic rifle. During this time, every bullet is infused with poison that does damage over 6 seconds and can stack up to 20 times on a target. And there we have it, a brief short introduction to each of the available Wayfinders at the start of Early Access. Remember, you'll be able to mix and match weapons for your Wayfinders and alter the combat profiles through your echoes and modifications, as well as where you spend points on abilities. We'll be diving into the lore and story of Wayfinder and each hero in upcoming videos. If you enjoyed this one, don't forget to subscribe and let me know in the comments which Wayfinder you're most excited to play. I also have a poll running in the community tab if you want to drop your vote there. As always, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Take care, Wayfinders.